Hello, welcome to NC Continental Prime, reaching you live from our studio in Lagos, Nigeria. I am Benga Aboro, and these are the headlines at this hour. Polls close in Zambia after a largely peaceful day. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa wraps up his testimony at the country's State Capitol Commission. And Ethiopia denounces destructive alliance between rebels from Tigray and a group from Oroma. We'll bring you all the details shortly. NC Continental Prime begins in Southern Africa, where voting has officially ended in Zambia. Those in polling stations which started operating late were allowed to remain open. Zambians kept voting at jammed polling stations after polls closed on Thursday, pointing to a high turnout in a showdown between President Edgar Lungu and main opposition rival Hakainde Hichilema. Polls officially closed at 6 p.m., but voters were still casting ballots at many voting stations. But as millions cast their ballots, Internet Blockage Observatory Net Blocks said social media platforms were restricted in the country. Real-time network data confirm that social media messaging platforms are now restricted in Zambia. The restriction of internet access could fuel tension and suspicion about the outcome of the vote. Now, joining us on NC Continental Prime this evening to unpack the elections in Zambia is News Central's correspondent, Lydia Makinda. Hi, good evening, Lydia.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. Now, Lydia, what's the update on the voting process so far, and what was the conduct of the election like?
Well, the election has been going on well, despite that some part of the country experienced violence. We saw that especially in the capital city of Zambia, which is Lusaka, has experienced some kind of violence. The PF member who is an MP has just been attacked by the suspected PNG party members. So he has been stabbed. And we also saw that a man has been murdered in Solwezi, that's northwestern province, together with his brother. This is also he's suspected to be a PF member who has been murdered by the UPND party members, in the view that the man has been suspected to be carrying some ballot paper, so he was stoned to death, so to say, because they were stoning his car and then he died. Despite that, the election has been going on well in other parts of the country. We saw that 10 provinces of the country, and then everything has been going on well. The turnout in number is quite impressive. We see that people are so excited for this day. They have been waiting for this day, and then especially women came up in numbers. So we say that the percentage of women are the ones that are voted most in some parts of the country. And then we also saw that His Excellency Dr. Edgar Changwa-Lungu laid an example by being the first person to be at the polling station. And later on, we also saw some party presidential candidates have, taken place in voting. They've also gone to cast in their votes. Hakainde Hichilema also went there, and the only remaining president, the former remaining president, who is Rupia Bwezan-Banda, also went in and to cast in his vote, which afterward he spoke to some journalists, urging each and everyone to be calm, and also urging the presidential candidates that are in that to accept whatever results that are going to come after this election. He has also thanked the Zambian people for coming in numbers to show their rights, that it is indeed that Zambian really know the importance of voting, and they know that the power is in their hands.
Okay.
So for now, I can say that the election that had opened at 6 p.m. and was supposed to close at it opened at 6 a.m. and was supposed to close at 6 p.m. Though that people were in numbers, and they are now still voting, even as I'm talking to you.
Now, Lydia, we've seen that the African Union Observer Mission said, and SADC said they were going to monitor the elections digitally because of the coronavirus pandemic. Any news from international observers and other observer missions on the elections, and what's the opposition saying? Are they saying it's been free and fair?
It has been free and fair, and from the international observers, we saw that before actually coming in, His Excellency had issued, His Excellency Dr. Edgar Changwa Lungu had issued a statement to say that the international organization, they should not interfere. Instead, they should just monitor the election, but not to interfere. So we are seeing that to be really in place, and therefore they are monitoring the election. And from the statement that was said yesterday by the AU, they said that everything is going on well. They have not experienced any difficulties, or they have not experienced any challenges with the Zambians. Therefore, they have also said in the statement say that the election has been free and fair, and that to them they say that there's no violence happening in the country. So from the opposition as well, we see that they are also saying that the election has been free and fair, but only the ruling party is the one that has been attacked. Therefore, they have issued a statement to say it has not been free and fair because the opposition party are the one attacking the ruling party.
Okay, finally, Lydia, before I let you go, when are we expecting results from the Zambian Electoral Commission?
I didn't get you.
When are we expecting, when are results expected since polls have closed?
All right, from the Electoral Commission of Zambia, they said that the result will be announced after 72 hours. So we say that in 3 days' time, the final result will be said. For now, they're just counting has started, and others that are still in the queue and voting, they're still going on.
Thank you very much.
2 hours, the result will be announced.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Always a pleasure talking to you. We'll definitely be monitoring the situation in Zambia as the news evolves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, staying in the region, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa wrapped up his testimony at the country's State Capture Commission, appearing before the commission for a second day. This time in his capacity as president, Ramaphosa said the true cost of state capture to South Africa may never be known. Ramaphosa's testimony brings the country's Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture, fraud and corruption in the public sector officially to an end. The commission started in August 2018 and ran for 428 days, calling on hundreds of witnesses to testify about the millions of rands that were looted from the state. Now, joining us this evening on NC Continental Prime is political analyst at the Institute for Global Dialogue, Tanusha Naidu. Thank you very much, Tanusha, for joining us this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation, and good evening to the viewers as well. Always a pleasure to be on. Now,
Tanusha, let's just have a look at President Ramaphosa's testimony over the last 2 days. Very briefly, do you think he has given any significant insight into the level of state capture in South Africa?
I think there are a few ways to answer that question. The first one would be, it has been unprecedented in the context of our democratic history that a sitting president would appear before a commission. But at the same time, it's unprecedented that we had such a commission in the first place. So I think in that space and on that score, even in his closing remarks today, he mentioned that he felt it was his need to come to before and present himself before the commission and to answer questions that the commission may have around his understanding, his knowledge, and perhaps what he was aware of and not aware of when it came to the whole question of state capture. Now, whether or not he had created or opened up the space for more information for the South African public and more generally for the evidence leaders and the commission head chair, acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, to find and put together their evidence in terms of what the report will look like. I think, at times, Mr. President Ramaphosa was cautious. He was cautious. He took a very kind of a procedural approach sometimes to his evidence, but he also didn't want to implicate anyone. And I think the challenge that he has is that he wants to make sure that the evidence he gave was to actually acknowledge that state capture did happen, to acknowledge that it was something that became part of our tapestry of our landscape in South Africa. But more importantly, I think to also try and get to the point that he has a narrative, he has a process that he wants to go forward with. And that process is to reforming the state institutional architecture, putting into place policy certainty, but also dealing with very, very critical issues with regard to professionalizing the public service, but also dealing with procurement processes and this relationship between party and the issues around state capture and, more importantly, the political party funding. But I think on overall aggregate, when you look at his testimony, not just in the last 2 days, but also in the previous 2 days when he was, I think in April, or towards the end of April when he was at the commission, it's to take it as a collective and to say that given the fact that he's the state president of the country, it is definitely a difficult position for him to have given the kind of information. And I think that the intricacies that we are looking for didn't necessarily come out. But I think what we have is a president that's really very, very bent on process. And he's looking to the process of the State Capture Commission report and then how that will take him forward in terms of the recommendations and what he's going to do with those recommendations.
Now, Tanusha, looking at President Cyril Ramaphosa as a person, it did appear with two different hats as the leader of the ANC and as President of the Republic of South Africa. Do you think his testimony does enough to vindicate him as a person, as someone who was not involved in state capture and try to fix it?
I'll answer that in two ways. I think the first one is, what did he know? When did he know it? And in terms of the information that he did come to be aware of, how did that impact him? The one example he gave I think it was yesterday, is that he spoke about the fact that when we had that entire finance ministry being put on space, and the fact that the finance minister was asked to resign and we brought in a makeshift finance minister, he actually said he had 5 options. The president said he had 5 options. Does he resign? Does he stay? What would be his option? And he decided to stay. And I think that in itself tells you that the information kind of got him to a point where he said, well, I'll stay. But I think on the other hand, on the other spectrum of this is the question around this, the idea of the unofficial information and how that may have played itself out. And more importantly, could he have acted on that information? I think there were times in his 2 days and previously where he acknowledges and he talks about the fact that, state capture happened at a time when it caught the ANC blindsided. The Guptas were there. This family that essentially ended this whole context of state, brought about this whole context of state capture and so forth. But I think the challenge is really around the fact that the capacity in which he served the South African Republic as the deputy president in administration, where I think he had to deal with the compromises, he had to deal with the different types of dynamics around factionalism, and he had to also understand that his role was there, but whether or not he could push forward. And I think that is the challenge here in terms of the question you're asking, because I think we will never be satisfied in the sense to say that, did you know, did you not know, and did you think that by staying in the government, were you doing anything of productive significance in order to bring about the reforms you're talking about? But nevertheless, he stayed the course, and now this is where we are.
quite a balancing act, considering all the entry cases of his various positions in the past. Now, the commission has been running for a long time, 428 days to be specific. It's come to an end today. What do you make of it in general? Was it successful, and how effective was it in general?
I think, the commission, it's about three and a half years or thereabouts. I mean, the commission essentially, I think, was important for us as South Africans and the general public and people in the political space to get a sense of what state capture was and to get a sense of at what level state capture was taking place. I think what the commission has done is that it gave us a sense of how state capture operationalized itself. It gave us an understanding, even if it was quite a tip of the iceberg understanding, because they'll never get to the real percolated levels, drilling down into how state capture happened. But I think the point is that they gave us an understanding and architecture of how the state capture took place, what were the mechanisms, how it got operationalized, who were the players, and what were the spoils in all of this. I do think that that the commission had a very important mandate. I think that the commission had opened up the space. The commission has essentially now has to do the hard work and write the report. And I think that's going to be an important report that's going to tell us, in the context of their work over the last 3.5 years, how effective it was and how that report needs to be implemented or taken on review and then to be implemented in terms of the recommendations. But I do think that the other aspect of this commission was the decorum and the integrity that the acting Chief Justice Zondo brought in the way that he managed the entire operation of the State Capture Commission. He was seen as somebody that was coherent. He was a very open, a very balanced commissioner chair. He was also one that wanted to know both sides of the story. He would ask the witnesses to give both sides of the story. He was caring. And I think that made this commission very, very important in terms of the way in which its demeanor was defined and characterized. And lastly, to just say that as we go forward, I think it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of controversy as well about how costly the State Capture Commission has been. And people have basically worked tirelessly over weekends, over long periods, sometimes not knowing if the money was going to come through for the extension, but nevertheless went through. And I think it's a commitment. So I think even in his closing remarks today, Acting Chief Justice Zondo had mentioned that there's a lot that went into this commission just to get us as the South African public and also all the others, the media, just to get us to understand that this situation was much deeper than what we had anticipated.
Now, Tanusha, finally, state capture has come to an end, and because of state capture, the failure of the former president to appear, Jacob Zuma, before the commission is why he's in jail. You've had testimony from a sitting president, unprecedented things that have never happened in South Africa's history. So now that the testimony is complete, what are the next steps? And when can we expect the findings of this commission?
Well, today was the wrapping up of the commission with President Ramaphosa giving his final testimony. I think the next steps here is for all of this to be collated, and then for Acting Chief Justice Zondo to be able to say, get down and start writing the report. I think he has until September, I stand corrected on this, but I think he has until September to finalize the report with all inputs, with all recommendations, and then to present it to the president thereafter. It would take us a period of about 1.5 months. If he needs more time, I'm not sure where it is. But once he presents it to President Ramaphosa, it's then the onus is on President Ramaphosa to decide what he's going to do and how he's going to take the report findings further and the recommendations operationalized. We have to also be very clear that this report will not necessarily be received with open arms by everybody. There will be people that will object to it. There will be stakeholders that will say that they want to take the report on review. There will be litigation. So down the line, I think once this process is finished, we've got to then prepare ourselves for other processes that may not be necessarily thinking about this report as just let's go to implementation, but rather it's going to be about this report is going to basically open up other avenues of contestation, and we have to then think about how that's going to play out.
Thank you very much, Tanusha Naidu. Always a pleasure talking to you. Do appreciate your insights on the subject.
Always a pleasure as well, and lovely, and really enjoy being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. From the south, we move to the north of the continent, where Algeria's state prosecutor has ordered an investigation into the lynching of a man by a mob who accused him of deliberately starting fires. The killing took place in the Tizi Ouzou area, which has been the hardest hit as dozens of fires rage across the country for days, killing 69 persons. Meanwhile, human rights activists say the man had actually come to help fight the fires and was not an arsonist. Senior Algerian officials have, however, stressed that arsonists are to blame for much of the devastation that the country's endured in the series of blazes. We'll now head to the east of the continent, where Ethiopia's rebel group, Oromo Liberation Army, says it has agreed a military alliance with Tigrayan forces from the north of the country to fight the government. The government designated both groups as terrorist organizations in May. An alliance between the Oromo Liberation Army and Tigrayan forces could put further pressure on Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The government has not only had to battle Tigrayan forces, it is also facing a series of conflicts in different parts of the country. The Oromo Liberation Army, which is pushing for the self-determination of the Oromo people, has had limited military successes, but it has made parts of the region very unstable. Meanwhile, Ethiopia denounced Thursday a destructive alliance unveiled this week between rebels from war-torn Tigray and a group from Oromia, the country's largest region. The Oromia group, which calls itself the Oromo Liberation Army, went public with a purported alliance on Wednesday, telling the AFP the agreement is at a very early stage. At a press conference on Thursday, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's spokeswoman, Belen Siyum, noted that lawmakers in May formally designated both the Oromo Liberation Army and the Tigray People's Liberation Front as terrorist organization. Belen said reports the two groups joining forces was not surprising for the federal government. She noted that the government had been indicating for over 2 years now that the TPLF has been using the Oromo people as errand runners for their destructive mission.
This is not surprising for the federal government, this alliance between two terrorist groups. Both groups have been designated as terrorists by the House of People's Representatives in early May. And while the timing of the public declaration needs an examination, the government has been indicating for over 2 years now that the TPLF have been using Shane as errand runners for their destructive mission. In yesterday's public declaration of this unusual marriage between these two groups, which they have acknowledged publicly, what they have also acknowledged is that they are working in unison, leading towards destructive activities against the stability of the nation, and that terrorism is a general feature of both.
Staying in Nigeria, the Association of Resident Doctors at the Rivers State University Teaching Hospital has suspended its 7-day solidarity strike. President of the Rivers State University Teaching Hospital branch of the Association of Resident Doctors, George Ella, said the decision follows an emergency congress held on Sunday, 8th of August. Ella, who stressed that the resumption takes immediate effect for the assured Rivers residents of good health service delivery. So the Rivers State government has demonstrated commitment to addressing the nagging welfare challenges of the resident doctors. Meanwhile, the national executive of the Nigerian Resident Doctors Association is currently in a meeting to resolve the impasse with the federal government. The United Nations Information Center, in collaboration with the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, today celebrated young people's contribution to conflict prevention and transformation, social justice, and sustainable peace. International Youth Day is commemorated annually on the 12th of August, bringing youth issues to the attention of the international community and celebrating the potential of youths as partners in today's global society.
To commemorate the International Youth Day, Nigerian youths have been urged to help revolutionize the nation's largest employment sectors by bringing their innovation and creativity to bear on a system that needs to become sustainable and climate-friendly.
I wait to hear your words of wisdom.
The United Nations Information Center disclosed this at an event to mark the 2021 Youth Day in collaboration with the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. It was also made clear that no generation has suffered more from lost opportunities and disruptions over the past year than young people, as COVID-19 has placed yet another major hurdle in front of today's youth as they endeavor to fulfill their potential.
This generation of young people is the largest cohort in history, with an unprecedented 1.8 billion young people worldwide, many of whom live in Africa. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy and most populous country. With our 41 million young people, Nigeria contributes close to 20% of Africa's youth. And young people between the ages of 18 to 29 years constitute 40% of Nigeria's population. This burgeoning youth bulge should be viewed as a blessing rather than a curse for Nigeria, one that can power the economy and society to greater heights.
Other stakeholders made passionate appeals to the youth and governments on job creation.
It's not for nothing that only a few days ago the Commonwealth published the Youth Development Index of the world. This index shows what has happened in the world with young people between 2018 and 2021. That report shows that there is hope. There is hope because on all the fronts that used to be bad, the report shows that in health, in education, in employment, in inclusivity, in participation, and overall well-being, in peace and security, our young people have had a very phenomenal, well, maybe not so phenomenal, but some progress has been made.
If the federal government and state government can invest in the agriculture value chain, that is from the produce to the markets, a lot of jobs will be created. The youth unemployment we are talking about these days will be reduced drastically.
The theme for this year is Transforming Food Systems, Youth Innovation for Human and Planetary Health, which highlights the success of such a global effort, which will not be achieved without the meaningful participation of young people.
You're watching NC Continental Prime. Coming up on the news, Africa's COVID-19 caseload exceeds 7.13 million. We'll bring you details of this and more when we return. And now to a continued coverage of the coronavirus pandemic across Africa. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, says the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa surpassed 7.13 million on Thursday. The Africa CDC says the death toll from the pandemic stands at almost 180,000, while over 6.21 million patients across the continent have recovered from the disease. South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt and Ethiopia are the countries with the most cases in the continent. In terms of the caseload, Southern Africa is the most affected region, followed by the northern and eastern parts of the continent. Central Africa is the least affected region. In the meantime, the Nigerian government has confirmed the receipt of about 170,600 doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccines, the single-dose vaccines, which were received at the Federal Cold Storage Facility in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, according to Nigeria's National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, will be administered to high-risk, hard-to-reach riverine and vulnerable communities. The vaccines from the first tranche of vaccines is expected in August. News Central's Amadine Uyu reports.
Officials receiving Nigeria's first tranche of Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The vaccines acquired by the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, which was set up in November 2020, successfully arrived at the nation's federal cold storage facility in Abuja.
This journey began with a historic COVID-19 vaccine procurement agreement signed on 28 March 2021. All African Union member states through the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, AVAT, set up in November 2020 under the African Union chairmanship of His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, will have access to 220 million doses of Johnson & Johnson single-shot COVID-19 vaccine, with the potential to order an additional 180 million doses.
Officials on hand to receive the vaccines give reasons for opting for this particular product.
As a single-shot vaccine, it is easy and cheaper to administer. Second, the vaccine has a long shelf life and favorable storage condition. Last but not least, the vaccine is partly manufactured on the African continent.
The vaccines received today are a product of the AVAT initiative, a collaboration between the African Union, the United Nations, the African Center for Disease Control, and the Afri-Exim Bank. The vaccines require a temperature storage of +2 degrees Celsius to about +8 degrees Celsius. Nigeria becomes the 7th African country to receive the vaccines, following its initial rollout on August the 11th and the first received by Togo. This is part of about 200 million doses being expected by the African Union.
The balance of the vaccines will be delivered over the coming months. We have the capacity to store and distribute this vaccine all the way to the point of working freezers in all 36 states plus the Federal Capital Territory. The vaccines have been received in Cairo, Egypt, Lesotho, Angola, Mauritius, Ghana, and now Nigeria. It is worthy to note that Nigeria will receive in August a total of 1,173,132 doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccine, followed every month by deliveries until we reach the total volume of 29.8 million doses.
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine we have today was listed for emergency use by WHO on the 12th of March. The vaccine has been authorized for use in many countries, including in Europe, in the United States, and others.
The UNICEF country representative urged Nigerians to take the vaccination campaign seriously.
This is the time to step up and get vaccinated, to take your responsibility, whether you're an individual, whether you're a religious leader, a traditional leader, or a governor, is to encourage all your people to take the vaccines as quickly and as timely as is possible in an orderly fashion.
Nigeria's Primary Healthcare Development Agency says the single-shot vaccines will be administered to high-risk areas, hard-to-reach areas, vulnerable and riverine communities where access to vaccines is difficult. From Abuja, Amadine Uyi, News Central Television.
The United States Embassy in Kabul has urged American citizens to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible. This was disclosed in a second security alert issued within a week by the embassy, calling on Americans to leave the country immediately. The alert comes amidst the Taliban's advance against government forces throughout the country. It also included instructions to contact the embassy for those who cannot afford a flight or are waiting for a child or spouse to get their visa to leave Afghanistan. Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price has warned that the embassy's capacity to aid U.S. citizens is extremely limited. But he noted that the U.S. is sending additional troops into Afghanistan to help evacuate some personnel from the embassy in Kabul. Now, Tolu Adilera Balogun has the business news.
Here's some more business news for you this evening. I'm Tolulokwe Adilera Balogun. The Environment Ministry in Windhoek, Namibia, stands to generate close to 6 million Namibian dollars after successfully selling off 57 out of 170 elephants that were put up for auction in December 2020. The ministry announced that the sale of the animals will raise 5.9 million Namibian dollars. The sale attracted 5 bidders, of which only 3 were successful. The ministry would not provide the names of the 3 bidders, citing confidentiality clauses in the signed contracts. The funds generated through this auction will be transferred into the Game Product Trust Fund to be reinvested in the conservation of Namibia's wild animals as well as community conservancies. Now, the animals were put up for auction in a bid to reduce tusker populations under pressure from drought and territorial conflict with humans. 42 of the pachyderms will be exported to destinations that government did not disclose. The other 15 will remain in Namibia but under private ownership. According to official estimates, the country is home to some 28,000 elephants, and the government resorted to selling live animals after being criticized for shooting elephants to control overpopulation. The African Development Bank is financing tech education in Africa and has announced the enrollment of 130,000 users in its Coding for Employment digital skills program. In the information release, the bank added that the program is intended to equip African youth with information and communication technology, entrepreneurship, and soft skills training to compete in a digital economy. The program's online platforms offer in-demand technical courses such as web development, design, data science, and digital marketing for free. Registered students are achieving a course completion rate of more than 80%. South Africa's coal exports have slowed in the first half of 2021 due to security problems and a lack of rail capacity by the state-owned Transnet. Exaro Resources explained in a statement that thermal coal prices surpassed $100 a ton during the period, but unfortunately about 9 million tons of producers' shipments were lost due to transport issues. The company also said that locomotive unavailability, coal line shutdown disruptions, derailments, and other operational challenges, combined with vandalism and sabotage of rail infrastructure and rampant cable theft, have resulted in one of the worst export rail performances for the industry. And staying in South Africa, the JSE-listed Pan-African Resources announced that its Barberton Mines operation has successfully concluded a 3-year wage agreement with the National Union of Mine Workers and a 5-year wage agreement with the United Association of South Africa. The agreement with the mine workers provides for an average yearly wage increase of about 5.6% compounded yearly for the bargaining units over a 3-year term. This is effective from July the 1st and ends on June 30th, 2024. The two unions represent the majority of employees at Barberton Mines. Now, the second agreement is effective from July 21st and terminates on June 30th, 2026. We head to East Africa now, where Kenya's Revenue Authority has announced that Kenyans will begin paying more for fuel, cigarettes, bottled drinking water, beer, fruit juice, and other excisable products, effective October 1st, 2021. This follows a legal notice published by the Revenue Authority, which allows the Commissioner General to adjust the prices of the products by 4.97%, termed as inflation adjustment on excise duty charged on products. The Commissioner is required under the Excise Duty Act of 2015 to to adjust the excise duty rates of products annually to consider the rate of inflation. And that's business news on NC Continental Prime. There's more news coming your way. I'm Tanusha Naidu.
Now let's join Udoka and Joku for the sports update.
All right, and in sports, Kenya's world record holder and Olympic silver medalist Bridget Kosgei will defend her London Marathon title in this year's race on the 3rd of October. Now, the 27-year-old is aiming for a third successive title in London after also winning the race in 2019. Ethiopia's Shura Kitata also returns after beating Kenyan great Eliud Kipchoge to win the 2020 men's race. The event is being run in autumn rather than its usual April date because of COVID-19 precautions. Now, this year's edition will involve 50,000 runners completing the traditional course from Black Hill to the Mall. Now, Kosgei will be up against compatriot and New York champion Jocelyn Jepkosgei and Ethiopia's Rosa Dereje, the 10th fastest woman of all time over the distance. And Uganda's Olympic medalist got a huge reward, which came in the form of brand new cars handed out by President Museveni. Now, the handover was the climax of the state reception hosted by the president to thank the 25-man team that won 4 medals, 2 golds, silver, and bronze at the end of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which wrapped up on Sunday. Now, President Museveni handed over the cars after speeches from the First Lady and the Minister of Education and Sports, Mama Janet Museveni, the State Sports Minister, Hamson Dennis Obua, among several other technocrats. Now, 4 medals from Tokyo marked Uganda's best ever show at the Olympics, and the country is tied 36th with Greece on the medal table. And now moving over to Sepp Blatter. Now, a Swiss prosecutor wrapped up 4 days of final interviews with former FIFA president Sepp Blatter in a long-running investigation into a suspected fraudulent payment in 2011. Now, former World Football chief Blatter has met with a federal prosecutor every day since Monday for final hearings in the case that shook the sports. Blatter has been investigated over a 2 million Swiss francs payment to Michel Platini, who was then in charge of European football's governing body, UEFA. And the final hearings took place in Zurich, where FIFA has its headquarters. Now, Blatter was forced to stand down in 2015 and was originally banned by FIFA for 8 years, later reduced to 6 over ethics breaches when he authorized what prosecutors termed a disloyal payment to Platini. In other words, one made in his interest rather than FIFA's. Moving over to some transfer stories now. For 28-year-old Belgian Romelu Lukaku, he has returned to Stamford Bridge on a 5-year deal, having left the Blues to join Everton for £28 million in 2014. Now, the fee is just short of the British transfer record of £100 million paid by Manchester City for Jack Grealish. Now, more money has now been spent on Lukaku than any other player in the history, with clubs paying out a combined figure of about £290 million in transfer fees for him. Now, 2 of the top 5 fees paid for a player in British football history have now been for Lukaku. And for Chelsea director Marina Granovskaya, he said in Lukaku they have signed, quite simply, one of the world's best striker and, of course, goal scorer. Looking forward to the start of the English Premier League tomorrow, where we have the game between Brentford and Arsenal. And that's much you can take on Sports Update on NC Continental Prime. I am Udoka Njoku.
Thank you very much, Udoka.